The next session, which is titled Technologies for India, I'm very excited to now present the track owner and the moderator. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Hemant Pandey. Hemant did his BTech from IIT Bombay and then went on to do a MPhil and a master's and a PhD degree from Rutgers University in the US. After that, he spent time at Siemens and TRDDC, as part of his industrial labs experience. And he's been for a long time now with Persistent, and most recently he's currently holding the title of Executive Director at ACM India, and he has about 3 decades of experience after his education. So without much further ado, I will hand it over to Hemant, who will introduce the track and our esteemed lineup of speakers for this track. Hemant, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Satish. So welcome to the final session of this academic research summit, jointly organized by us, the 3 entities. So we have seen really excellent sessions, starting with Raghu's session about the technology which is in place, coming in place, already deployed. Then Sriram talked about the challenges or posed certain challenges and things like that. And followed by that, we had really interesting sessions, whether talks or panel discussion and things like that, from people in academia talking about the things that they are working on, with what that work could be applied to, and people from industry talking about, again, here are the problems, and what if, that kind of thing. So throwing challenges at the audience over here, which is academic and people from Microsoft Research and so on. So consistent with that, but with a little twist, we said that let's organize a session with theme which is India scale challenges. And as you know, when you say India scale, what kind of scale that is. As Abhiram mentioned yesterday morning, our charter at ACM India is to advance computing as a science and profession. And within that, what we are also trying to do is foster collaboration between industry and academia. So in order to do that, what we said that in addition to this technologies for India, for that scale, which may or may not involve, I'll just be very honest up front, machine learning, AI, and I'll leave it to the speakers. Bring that aspect in of startups or private companies with ambition to solve India-level problems through technology, and also seeking collaboration with academia. So that is the focus that we have for this session. And we got some really good speakers here from a diverse background. So somebody not needing to go to college to do wonderful things, to doing PhD at IISc in the 70s. Okay, so this kind of, not panel, but the set of speakers that we have, and they will talk about interesting problems, interesting challenges that they're working on in private industry. And again, as a theme, talk about the opportunities of working with academia to solve the hard problems. Okay, so to start with, I'll invite Saurabh Panjwani, who is like me. He is a graduate of IIT Bombay, also stayed in the same hostel briefly. So the bond is even stronger. So he, again, did his PhD after IIT BTech. He did his PhD from UCSD. in cryptography. So he's an authority in cryptography, and he will bring out that mention in the talk. But again, I'll leave it to him. It's really new stuff that these people at iSpirit are working on. So he's full-time at iSpirit, which is a technology think tank, which encourages and supports products from India for India at world class. So he represents that. It's a non-profit organization. He has worked in Microsoft Research, so he found Microsoft Research India. So he did find some colleagues over here, and then he joined Bell Labs. I don't know what comment that will elicit from from Chandu. And then he said that I want to do things at India scale and overall support the aspiring industry products. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to him. Please welcome Saurabh Panchwani.
So as Hemant mentioned, I'm a crypto person by background. But this talk is not going to be about crypto. If you're expecting crypto plus AI applied for India scale problems and social good, you're not going to get that much of a masala. But this is a fairly important problem in a very relevant domain where AI comes up a lot, healthcare. And the problem itself is it's not immediately clear whether ML and AI will be immediately relevant in solving the will be relevant in solving the immediate problems, but they will show up in the long run for sure. It's a very fundamental problem in healthcare that we are grappling with, countries across the world, and hopefully I'll be able to inspire some of you ML and AI experts to come with us, join us in trying to solve this problem. Narendra Modi and his team up in Delhi launched this grand program called Ayushman Bharat 3 months back, and this has been the talk in the news in Indian media, and also people like Bill Gates tweeting about it. Fairly ambitious, it's a very ambitious program, and it's already had a significant reach. And the main point here is with programs like these and a lot of state versions of Ayushman Bharat running now, the reach of health insurance in India is rapidly increasing. Today it stands at something of the order of 20%, 20 to 25% people are covered by health insurance today. But with these kind of grant programs coming in, the reach is going to increase dramatically. And only in 100 days, this program has touched close to, it's about, I think the number of people touched is about 600,000, and the number of claims processed was of the order of 500,000. The problem with Ayushman Bharat and a lot of these state-sponsored insurance schemes is that we are ending up aping a lot of the things that have been done in the West in terms of implementing large-scale insurance programs. And insurance-driven care has some serious limitations, which basically come down to two things. One is this whole point that most of the whole idea of insurance-driven care is centered around treating sickness. There's a disproportionate amount of emphasis given to sickness as opposed to overall health and well-being of the individual. Insurance companies reimburse doctors for the volume of treatments that they provide to patients and not for the overall value that the treatments brings to the patient in the long run. Patients themselves, consumers themselves, are not told by insurers to take care of their health. Taking care of your health is not a mandate of insurance companies, and that's something that the insurance world doesn't even touch upon, or very rarely touches upon. The other problem, which we refer to as procedure inflation, stems from the inherent asymmetry that exists between the insurer world and the healthcare providers world. Insurers I find it difficult to completely ascertain that medical treatments that are given for certain conditions were really required or not. So a stark statistic in this context is what goes on in the US. In the US, about a third of the surgeries that are performed are unnecessary in nature. Essentially, that means that non-surgical interventions for those conditions were not even considered before those surgeries were performed. Like people are getting root implants even though there's nothing seriously wrong with the teeth, and various such stories. And this has a lot of long-term. I mean, this of course damages health in the long run. And I already have a question. This must be really interesting. Yeah. So good. Yeah. So I'm coming to that. The slide doesn't have it yet, but the Oh, India, what is the percent? India percent, I don't think we have such granular data for India yet, because a lot of this data sits inside insurance companies' own database, and it's not a very open system in India yet. It's probably more in the US than in other parts of the world, because the US healthcare system is definitely much more criticized than others, but we don't have raw, exact data for India. Yeah, so the core issue is that there are no incentives that this whole insurance care model, there is no element of incentives either on the consumer end or on the provider end to think or act in terms of long-term health and well-being of the entire population. So doctors are not incentivized to give good care which could which could guarantee long-term health for the patient, and patients and consumers in general are not incentivized to make good health decisions even before they fall sick. And this is it's a well-recognized problem in the healthcare space, and there's lots of TED Talks on this, economist articles on this. It's we believe it's particularly pertinent in India today, and actually so people. Did I didn't. Yeah. And people have tried to solve this problem in the West, and the problem they've run into is essentially legacy. I mean, the idea of insurance is so entrenched in a lot of the developed economies that changing those systems is becoming very difficult, which is why we feel it's quite pertinent in India, because in India, penetration of insurance is still pretty low. It's about of the order of 20% or so. As I said, 20% people insured by health insurance today. And growing rapidly, with Ayushman Bharat, with a lot of these state-sponsored schemes, and private insurance now turning around profits, it's actually growing rapidly. So this is the right time when we should intervene and try to bring about a change. And so what we are proposing here is something essentially simple, but going to be extremely hard to implement. So our idea is, let's broaden the scope and the role of insurers. Let's think of transitioning insurance companies to take the shape of what we call care intermediaries, where they're not just playing the role of care financing, but they're also doing incentive management. They're providing incentives at both the consumer and the provider end, and towards making healthcare decisions which benefit the population in the long run. And we propose a new kind of mechanism. So we essentially say that this can happen through a new kind of care policies, healthcare policies, which we refer to as gamifier policies, which would have tools for incentivization built into them. So tools which would incentivize both consumers as well as providers to act in a manner which benefits overall health of the consumers. So gamifier policies, we will bring in techniques from microeconomics and behavioral economics to accomplish this objective. So essentially, the idea is to influence healthcare decision making for consumers and providers, so that there is long-term, globally optimal decision making. And just one small point here. I mean, so this whole idea of bringing incentive schemes into insurance policies has been attempted in small pockets in the world, and even in the US this is beginning, but the efforts are very sparse and far apart. So this slide essentially gives you a quick example of what a gamifier policy might look like. So the idea is, can we use auctions, which is a highly popular tool from microeconomics, and it's it's used actively on the internet today. And every time you're making a Google search query or making a Facebook post, there's someone behind the scenes running an auction and delivering those ads to you, which are shown the way they are on the internet. So online ad auctions are, have been quite successful for achieving, effective commerce on the internet. And so the thinking is, can we exploit an auctioning mechanism to make provider to consumer mapping more effective? And can we use that as an incentivization tool? Can we use that? Can we use the idea of auctions to help providers reduce their costs and to keep the costs low and in process to address this problem of procedure inflation? In practice, this could end up in looking like something like this, as shown in these 4 pictures. You could imagine a user going to a care intermediary specifying a specific care requirement, like I want to get a cataract surgery done. And the care intermediary would, at this point, run an auction where it would invite bids across various hospitals and doctors in the vicinity of that individual to come with proposals for how much it would cost to undertake the surgery, and then the intermediary would rank the providers out, just the way ad listings are created on the internet. And in doing this ranking, it will of course use the price, the bidding, the bids submitted by the providers as one of the key inputs. And other than the bids itself, there could be some quality scoring that it may apply. And quality scoring is important. You don't want price to be the only determinant for these provider listings. And post that, the consumer would select the provider of his choice, and then the price of the treatment would be decided essentially dynamically. And so it's not something that it would remain across different treatment requirements. The next time the same consumer goes to the intermediary, there could be different price that comes up for the same treatment. And because of this whole auctioning process, there's one is the pricing of the procedure becomes dynamic, and the other thing is providers are incentivized to keep their prices low, because otherwise their chances of being selected by the consumer reduces. So auctions are one possible tool that one could use for gamifying the mapping between consumers and providers in healthcare decision making. And there could be a bunch of other tools, and this is, we've done a survey on the potential tools one could use from the economics literature and using that survey figured out some of the potential tools that are available. We are not economists ourselves, and we are actually talking to some economists to get deeper into this, how big that toolbox can be. But the key challenge here, so in terms of trying to solve this problem at India's scale level, and coming up with solutions which really work, is this question that I posed here. So we have a lot of these techniques available from the economics literature, but figuring out what works and what doesn't requires real experimentation, and this is something that economists grapple with. They don't have. It's hard for them to come to real good answers to this kind of a question without running large-scale experiments. And so the main proposal that we have is that we should be trying to address this problem by building an experimentation framework which allows experimentation with gamifier policies. So a framework which allows creation of a large number of, potentially millions of gamifier policies could be created using this framework, and running real experiments around these policies on real people, and then assessing the impact on health outcomes. So it's of course it's not going to be. These are going to be long-term studies that you run using this framework. But the main point is there should be a language available to care intermediaries to be able to define policies, which have incentive tools built into them, and and using this language, they should be able to run experiments at different granularities. from a data perspective, I think one of the challenges, one of the interesting problems which will come up in the long run is once we have this kind of framework running and policy experiments happening, these experiments will throw up a lot of data, and care intermediaries, may have some privacy concerns with respect to this data. Of course, data interchange is important. It's important that what one learns from one experiment gets shared with other people in the ecosystem. Care intermediaries should be learning from each other's experiments, and that can, that requires a secure data exchange kind of a mechanism, and that's one place that I think that the role will data will become key. But at this point, I think the real important problem for us to solve is to create this kind of an experimentation framework. Of course, there are regulatory issues here, and that's something that we are doing in parallel. So there's of course we need to go convince people at IRDA. IRDA is a regulator for insurance in India to even think about broadening the scope of insurers and to talk about incentivization as a key part of insurance policies. That's a conversation that we are having in parallel. But at the same time, it's important to start building this kind of a technology framework, and this is one value that we as technologists can add to this whole space of healthcare incentives. So it's a rich area of collaboration between potential collaboration between computer scientists and economists, and we invite. So this is still early age thinking for us. It's not that we've gone too deep into this problem. We are while we talk to computer scientists, we are also engaging with economists in parallel and trying to figure out what are some of these approaches and how essentially figuring out what goes into the toolbox and what would be most relevant for the healthcare domain. But in parallel, I think it's interesting to start thinking about this framework and trying to design it. And so that's where I think computer scientists like you can come join us and participate. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions?
This is not preventive at all, right? The example that you gave.
One example. So I forgot to mention, there's actually a paper we've written on this, and if you want, we can share that paper with you. And we have more examples in that paper. And there's of course, preventive is also something that we've considered.
So when it is unnecessary to have a surgery, that kind of thing, I think Abhiram is talking about.
What will you do to improve your health?
Yeah, so essentially there's a lot of work on healthcare regimens. So there's so both preventive as well as curative. There's actually much more work on the curative side. There are things like diabetes or TB. There's rich literature on that, but similar stuff on preventive as well. So what for someone who's prone to having likely to have diabetes, what is the kind of lifestyle that he or she should be living so that he can prevent the onset of that. And so essentially, the idea is, can we take some of the elements of those, so regimen adherence tools is what I call them. Can we bring in some element of regimen adherence tools into Gamifier policies?
See, I do have a question here.
Yeah.
From the problem statement, I could make out that you must have worked closely with some of the insurance companies as well.
So we've spoken to a bunch of them. Worked closely is
The question is basically, which insurance company do you really feel like is more adaptable to this kind of technology?
So actually, one of the surprising things we found is that insurance companies in India are already beginning to look at incentivization on the consumer end. So there are two companies that we found which already have in their existing insurance policies some terms around, if you take care of your health, I'm going to give you.
Does anything stop you to take their name? Is there any kind of NDA signed with them?
No, there's no NDA. So it's Birla is one of them. I just don't remember the other one. I know that Birla, Aditya Birla is one of them. The other one I don't remember, but yeah.
So the message for the people who are prone to diabetes that they should stay away from Birla.
They should stay away from?
Stay away from Birla Insurance Company because their premium is likely to increase.
The premium is likely to. Yeah, so actually one thing that, yeah, that's a very good point. So incentivization, of course, it's going to cost money. I mean, running this framework, of course, in itself is going to be an expensive affair. So we have to think through, I haven't spoken about the financing of this thing, and but the hope is that the financing can be jointly managed by industry and the state. So in any large-scale solution like this will require some state intervention, and it cannot be just insurance companies by themselves should not be the only ones sponsoring incentive schemes. Otherwise, it's not going to work at large scale. So we need some state involvement on that front.
But the cost of healthcare is borne by insurance companies often. So what you're saying is that if the overall cost does come down, then there is an incentive for the insurance company as an intermediary.
Right. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say intermediary, not. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, in the case of ads, right, because there is so much, data and so on, one can hypothesize, policy 1, policy 2, and we can, figure out what will happen to RPM. There is a machinery that exists and understand, what you can to experiment, right? If you want to collaborate with computer scientists, right, what are you expecting from them? I mean, are you expecting them to build simulators? Are you expecting them to somehow work with you and you have data? What is it you want from computer science?
So I think it's level 1, as I said. I don't know why this keeps disappearing. But the level 1 is it? It's okay, I'll just talk. The first level is coming up with a machine-readable language for defining policies. And that is something that clearly requires some computer science expertise. It may not require ML expertise at this point, because I don't think that's not really an ML problem, obviously. But it requires people like you people with the formal methods and languages background to come participate. And this is something that we are doing in the insurance space in general. So even before we think about incentivization and holistic health and everything, claims processing today is a largely manually driven process. Not so much in the West, but definitely in India. And to bring in more automation into that process, we need to be able to cast current day insurance policies into machine readable format. That's one of the essential problems that we need to solve before we can even think about automation. And that is, I won't say it's a hard computer science problem, but it's an important computer science problem. And it is hard to the extent that some of these things, they have a lot of legalese, and it's not even possible to capture all of this insurance terminology in a Turing complete computer language. I don't think that's something that is even feasible. But it's something that we have to make an attempt at, and I think the eventual solutions will have mixed flavors of some machine readability and some non-readability, and that is an essential component where I think people who have any interest in solving this problem should come and talk to us about, because that clearly requires engineers and scientists scientist expertise, CS expertise.
I agree on the engineering aspect what you said, but then machine learning would definitely come into picture when you'll be recommending that these are the doctors we are recommending. And then when you'll be ranking them, because you'll need some ranking system to provide the order that, okay, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. So definitely for recommendations as well as ranking, you'll have to have machine learning solutions there. So you'll have to featureize the data for the doctors coming from the hospitals maybe, or maybe consumers, some past data or labelers basically.
Yeah.
But then you'll have to apply machine learning on top of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think at this point, our exploration of this toolbox that I spoke about has been mostly within the space of the economics literature. And it's not clear if that has all the solutions to these problems. And in fact, a lot of the regimen adherence work that we've studied actually has come out from the medicine literature, not from the economics literature. And there might be some ideas in the ML literature which could indicate a solution, but we've not. So actually, we don't have the solution, frankly. This is something this is the main message to you. We don't have the solution for this. We want to create a framework which would allow solutions to bubble up quickly. And the solutions will involve new kinds of techniques which are not covered in the literature currently.
So technically
may consider,
technically speaking, I don't think technical solution or ML solution would be a major problem. I think major problem here could be getting the training data, getting the data from hospitals or maybe clients or you can say patients, because they will be giving recommendation, they will be giving rating. Let's say if I have done some surgery for my eyesight or for anything, I'll have to give some rating to my doctor, right? So you'll need that data to train your model. I think that would be the biggest challenge, and that would be your first preparatory stage to work on that thing first. Machine learning can definitely give the solution later.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we're running out of time, so I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, why not?
There's a lot of talk. So
Yes.
Sid has also been involved in some of these data efforts at iSpirit, and he'll touch upon that.
Yeah. So I think with that comment, I will thank Saurabh. Thank you very much. Let's give him a big hand.